Hi, and welcome to the 2020 Snap E&T National Forum session, Snap to Skills, 4 Years of Lessons Learned on Snap E&T Operations. My name is Marcy Foster. I'm a Senior Technical Advisor within the Snap Office of Employment and Training, and I'm serving as the moderator today. So today you're going to be hearing a presentation from Nick Codd, Bree Nguyen, and Bob Thibodeau. Nick Codd is a senior consultant from the Seattle Jobs Initiative, or SJI, as you might hear a couple of times throughout this presentation. He has worked as a senior consultant with SJI for 4 years, delivering technical assistance focused primarily on Snap E&T and the Snap to Skills project. In addition, he offers technical assistance to assist communities to connect their homeless housing programs with their local workforce system, which often includes the integration of Snap E&T. And prior to coming to SJI, Nick worked for Building Changes in Seattle, Washington, where he managed a portfolio of grants and delivered TA addressing homelessness and housing instability. He's also managed E&T programs in the Seattle area and has a Master of Social Work from the University of Washington. Bree Nguyen is a senior consultant at Seattle Jobs Initiative. She uses improvement science, design thinking, and applied behavioral science to assist institutions and systems in tailoring programs to participant needs, centering the participant voice, and increasing their capacity to deliver effective workforce development services that move people out of poverty. So through the Snap to Skills project, she works with states to expand Snap E&T and led the development and operation of the Snap to Skills National Learning Academies in 2017 and 2018. Prior to SJI, Bree was a senior product manager in the technology sector. And Bob Thibodeau is a senior consultant at SJI. We have 3 senior consultants here today. For almost 5 years on SJI's Snap E&T TA work, including the Snap to Skills project. Prior to coming to SJI, Bob worked for Washington State's Department of Social and Health Services, where he served as the lead program manager for food assistance policy. Bob managed Washington's BFET program, or Basic Food Employment and Training Program, from April 2010 to October 2013. And before that, he was a food stamp eligibility worker, a family independence unit supervisor, and a food supplement, or SNAP, program manager for the state of Maine under Maine's Department of Human Services. Bob has more than 22 years experience with SNAP and Snap E&T. So we are really pleased to be joined by a panel of experts here. And thank you for joining today's session, to all of our speakers and to everyone who's listening. As you view the presentations, please ask your questions through the Q&A feature on the taskbar and add your comments in the chat box below. We will get to questions and answers at the end. At the conclusion of the presentation, the presenters will have the opportunity to address your questions. And one simple note of housekeeping, which is just that please remember any discussions today don't reflect USDA official policy guidance. With that, let's get started. So I actually have some opening remarks of my own. I'm, again, Marcy Foster, Senior Technical Advisor in the SNAP Office of Employment and Training, and have been the project manager for Snap to Skills for its existence. It was one of the first things I ever did coming to FNS, which has been since 2014. So Snap to Skills is, and I just want to sort of set the stage and level set this presentation a little bit before we get into some of the lessons that we've learned over working in this project for such a long time. So Snap to Skills is FNS's flagship TA project to support E&T expansion goals and increase the capacity of states to operate effective E&T programs that connect SNAP participants to skills training and good paying jobs. So what that means is that it is the largest contract we have to expand our capacity to help states build better programs, build bigger programs, and do it in the right way that connects people to skills training and better employment. This project really started in 2004. The idea of this project started in 2014 and has really grown over time, and it's had multiple iterations. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So Bree, can we go to the next slide? And I should say, so the Seattle Jobs Initiative, which we're joined here today with 3 senior consultants from SJI, led the Snap to Skills project for the first bulk of it from FY16 to FY19, and then recently has been joined by MDRC in the same Snap to Skills project, but a new iteration, and we'll talk about that moving forward. So in 2014 and 15, I just wanted to put a little bit out there, like why were we investing such resources into a project like this? It is the first TA project in the history of the SNAP ENT program, which is a decades-old program. But in 2014, FNS really put a lot of new capacity and new resources around ENT, with the idea that to really reduce family sustainability over time and SNAP participant sustainability and economic independence over time for the long term, we really need to put a greater emphasis on our SNAP ENT program. SNAP ENT is unique among workforce development programs in that it offers not only an uncapped source of funding through our 50/50 program, where we can reimburse states 50% of their eligible expenses above and beyond what is provided in our direct grants to them. So it's sort of a program for growth. It has the opportunity for expansion and growth within it in a fiscal sense. But it also is designed to serve SNAP participants. So it is really unique among workforce development programs in that, in part and parcel, it serves the people that need those services the most. They're not put at the end of the line, they're put at the front of the line. And so for us to really focus on economic independence for SNAP participants, we really felt as a federal agency, we needed to invest more resources in building SNAP ENT programs. But by and large, in 2014, states had pretty small programs. So there were a handful of large statewide ENT programs. There were a handful of people working on ENT, SJI being, of course, one of them. SJI is both a TA provider, but also a SNAP ENT provider in itself. And states wanted to do something more with ENT, and they were getting the message to do more with ENT, but didn't really have the knowledge about where to go from here, right? So how to even embark on an expansion project when honestly the program can be a complicated program, can be a complex program administratively to operate. And so we understood states were unsure of really where to start with basic things like how do we set up a billing system for our providers? How do we get providers on board? Do we operate a contract process? Is there RFP requirements? All of those like really logistical and technical operational issues that were getting in the way of expansion. It's just hard to know. It was hard to know where to begin. So they also had a desire to do more peer sharing. So we are seeing the fruits of the last 4 years, focusing more on national efforts. But for a long time, we really focused on regional, by region growth. And so states would meet within their region and have the benefit of understanding what other states were doing, but that was limited to 7 or 10 states. And so really wanted to do more peer sharing across regions, which is one of the things we brought to the SNAP to Skills project. States also felt disconnected from best practices. So state SNAP agencies are not often the agencies that are hearing the first about, effective workforce development services, effective career pathway programs, integrated, integrated education training programs. And so, and they're just not the first ones to be hearing that. They're really focused on doing what they do well, which is providing food assistance, providing nutrition assistance to the people in their state through the SNAP program. And so SNAP ENT, while a really important piece of it, was just not something, it was something we needed to increase their capacity on. So FNS at the time had new staff capacity. We operate in 2014, we opened the Office of Employment and Training, and we had 6 staff where we used to have one, we went from 1/2 of an FTE to 6 staff in the national office. We also added 1 regional analyst in all of our 7 regions. So we suddenly had tons of SNAP staff capacity within FNS to support a project, a large multi-million-dollar project like this. We had significant goals to expand ENT and then new resources with which to do that, and a new commitment. And so we put it together and came up with a concept for the SNAP to Skills project. And we're really pleased that in fiscal year 2016, we were able to get award a contract to the Seattle Jobs Initiative to operate SNAP to Skills. And do it in such a way that we could modify the project over time to adjust to upcoming goals as they evolved throughout the years. So Bree, you want to go to the next slide? So this just shows an evolution of Snap to Skills. So from 16 to now, we've done so many different things. It's really astounding, which ultimately is a pretty small team of people is really doing all of this work. We as an agency are very hands-on with Snap to Skills. We want to participate in all the calls. The national office is very engaged. So this it's not just SJI doing this, it's sort of the states involved, SJI and FNS working collaboratively, and now MDRC working collaboratively as part of this project. In FY16 and 17, we actually had 10 states that we selected and invited to participate with us. Those 10 states got significant technical assistance, monthly calls, I think 2 site visits that first, sometimes 3 that first 2 years. We did 2 convenings, actually, 2 in-person meetings where we brought all of the states together across all the different parts of the country and had meetings where we talked to and gave them time to work with each other on their plan for Snap E&T and really coach them throughout those 2 years on the operational building blocks of how to build a Snap E&T program. So figuring out, where you are now, where you want to go, and what are the operational steps you need to get there. And we also were able to develop an operations handbook. SJI developed an operations handbook that is still on our website today. And previously, before that, we had a Snap E&T policy. We had mostly policy memos in our policy toolkit, which told you what you can and can't do with E&T, but it didn't really tell you how to do it. And so the operations toolkit went through all of these steps, really from sort of soup to nuts, about how to build and expand with third-party providers. So services offered by CBOs and community colleges and workforce agencies, how to connect those to the state's Snap E&T program and all the operational steps needed to do it. And it's still there, it's a great resource, one of our more popular resources on our website. So I encourage you to take a look at that. We also have 10 or more policy briefs on topics like career pathways in Snap E&T, ABODs in Snap E&T, using data better. So we really had a plethora of resources in that first year, all on the Snap to Skills website, which is still there, snaptoskills.fns.usda.gov. And then the last part of that first round, we did what was called a Learning Academy. So the Learning Academy was beyond the 10 states. We identified, even with all this capacity, even with the FNS capacity and SJI and states doing what they needed to do, there weren't enough sort of national technical assistance consultant type providers. There was SJI, and SJI is a handful of people, so they can only do so much. So we did the Learning Academy. The Learning Academy idea was to train, so like a train the trainer model. So we would work with individuals who would go out and work with their states or their regions to develop E&T programs. We did that for 2 years. We did that in 17 and 18, and over 70 people participated, and each worked on a specific project, either in their state or their region. And it was one of the most interesting and rewarding things in this whole project, I think, just because it was so different than something that we've normally done. In FY18, we added more states, so we served another 10 states. We did a video series of success stories, added more resources and tools to the website, and just expanded what we were already doing. In FY19, we shifted a little bit, and the state TA was reduced in size a little bit, still 10 states, but not quite as many site visits. But we added what are called state institutes. So instead of doing training the trainer with these sort of national consultants, we did state institutes where states would apply to not do the TA. We added essentially an offering for states. So if you didn't want to be a Snap to Skills state and get assistance for a year and have Bob Thibodeau bugging you every month, you could do instead a institute. So you'd come for 2 days and work with Bob and Nick and Bree and on a specific topic and for the state institutes. And so we had 19 states who participated in those state institutes in FY19, and that was another really interesting thing. So, Snap to Skills has also been a vehicle for innovation for FNS with E&T. So it's a way for us to try new things and see what works. And it's been, I think it's been pretty effective. So this last year, this year and then moving forward, we're doing something a little bit different. We've had a number of years, or 4 years, of working on the building blocks of operations. what we observed in that time is that states are getting better at understanding how to build an ENT program, but we're still trying to figure out what's the best way to attract participants to this program. And so we really wanted to double down on participation and engagement and using human-centered design and behavioral science to understand why participants weren't engaging and to help them understand and be able to participate effectively in ENT, whether it was more of a need to overcome additional barriers that were getting in the way, or just that we weren't communicating enough about ENT and the benefits, or that we weren't offering the right services to them that didn't meet their needs. So this year and next, we're working with 7 states, and MDRC and SJI are working with 7 states to identify the problems with participation in those states and figure out solutions using behavioral science. There will also be resources and tools available for any other state that wants to understand better how to use these principles and increase their participation engagement. And we also have webinars. We had one on COVID-19 actually, and how that impacted ENT programs back in June, and about 600 people participated in that. So, so Snap to Skills is not just about, sometimes I think people think it's just about the states getting TA, but actually it's about just creating resources for everyone to use. And everything is always on the Snap to Skills website. So if we go to the next slide. So this just shows all the states we've reached, and it doesn't even show the Snap State Institutes or the Learning Academies. So we haven't reached every state, but we've gotten pretty far, sort of crawling across the country. And so, the different colors are the different years they participated, but overall the big picture is we've reached a lot of people in a lot of states. And some states receive more support than others, but we're really proud of the fact that we were able to get to every region in the country. So next slide. So 28 states have received direct TA, either 1 year or some states even up to 3 years. And a key goal has been really to build, increase, and strengthen those capacity and infrastructure building blocks of the operations. We have increased state capacity to bring on third-party providers. We've worked on community college partnerships and community-based organization partnerships. There's been a significant better understanding about how to leverage SNAP ENT 50/50 funds in order to mobilize these partnerships and in order to enable them to thrive. It's really fiscal policy and deep fiscal policy and operations to understand like how to even identify appropriate funds to leverage, but then also how to make sure that the state and the providers have that communication so that they're in compliance with federal regulations. So that it's been a journey. We've also created program champions throughout the country, not just through the Learning Academies, but through states who've gone to other states actually and spread the word about ENT and how to do this work. And then we've reached thousands of subscribers each month through the SNAP ENT review. Every month, SNAP ENT Review has become de facto SNAP ENT's newsletter for the program. And every month it's released, most every month. There are some months that we missed. We missed a couple months for COVID, I'll be honest. But it goes to thousands of people across the country and shares any latest news about SNAP ENT, whether it's a new policy guidance or a new webinar coming up or new activities. And it's not just Snap to Skills. It could be about this meeting, about the forum. It's everything. So I encourage you to sign up for the SNAP ENT review if you haven't already done so. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to skip over this. I'll just briefly go through this because I already talked about it, but this is just talking about, our new focus. So Bob and Bree and Nick are going to talk about what we've learned in the operational side of Snap to Skills. And that was really the first 4 years, but these next years are going to be a little bit different, and we're excited to see that evolution and that change. But we're going to be focusing a little bit more on participation and engagement, while not, of course, abandoning the focus on our operations, which is essential. But thinking about then how do those operations impact our ability to recruit and engage SNAP ENT participants? So I'll stop there and I'll let you guys go. I think we're going to Nick.
That's right. Yeah, thanks, Marcy. Appreciate it. So, right. So I'm going to get us started from the SJI side, and we're going to talk about the lessons learned, lessons that we've learned being involved in the technical assistance and all of the activities that Marcy just talked about and described. And we want to focus on what we've identified as some key areas or building blocks. And we're going to, I'll get into those in just a second. I guess what I would say about the lessons learned, there's been a number of lessons learned, some big, some small, some very detailed, some very operational, some very technical, and some more conceptual. And so we're going to try and consolidate all of that into these 4 areas. So, and again, the kind of the perspective here is that in working with states and counties, in some cases we've worked more directly with counties, these are the types of things that we've seen states and counties adopt and really get good at and have led to successful implementation, successful growth of their SNAP ENT programs. And in particular, focusing on the third-party partnership model and the 50-50 reimbursement model. Understanding how all that funding works and the opportunities associated with it. So again, we hope that you find this information helpful. During the question and answer session, you can ask follow-up questions. Of course, we can clarify on some of the things we might have talked about. We can expand on some of these things. So for us, the sort of these key building blocks that are common to states and counties that have built out strong ENT programs fall into 4 categories. The first one is assuming a new way of business, and I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. The next area is this area of staffing, leadership, and project management, and the importance around that. And then the third and fourth areas are really focused on SNAP employment and training knowledge and expertise, and then the expanded use of technology. So you can see there's kind of a range of things that we want to look at. So I think you can go on to the next slide. Thanks. Okay, so the first ones that I want to talk about, assuming a new way of business. And really sort of the lesson learned behind that is that SNAP employment and training calls for a new type of relationship between the SNAP agency and the workforce providers that's really built on collaboration. And again, it's going to be really centered on this third-party partnership model and the funding related to it. So I also want to just talk a little bit about sort of the context that we're coming from. And as I think Marcy talked about, is this technical assistance work was about building capacity, but it was really focused on this third-party partnership model and working with CBOs and community colleges, technical colleges to understand this model, to leverage the funds, and to figure out how to best serve mutual participants. And I think, the SNAP agencies across the country that we worked with that made solid progress have really understood that in order to do all of this, they needed to really adopt sort of a new way of business. They need to make a shift sort of in their mindset and their approach. And I think that falls into 2 areas that I'll touch base on. One is kind of this expanded mission. And then the other, which is closely related to this, is their new relationship and new role between the SNAP agency and the local workforce partners. So when I talk about expanded mission and the importance of that, what I think and what I've observed, across, with the states that we've worked with, is that, the core mission around providing SNAP is to address food insecurity, which is really important and essential, obviously. Work and work activities in sort of a traditional sense associated with SNAP have really been sort of from the context of helping people stay eligible for SNAP. It's really about maintaining SNAP eligibility, and for a good reason, and we understand all of that. But this effort is really about moving beyond that mission in itself, and really looking to effective ways to help SNAP participants build their skills, increase their income, increase their employment and career opportunities, and at the same time address some of the underlying circumstances that lead people to experience food insecurity. Their lack of skills, their lack of education, their lack of supports available to them. And to engage third-party partners that are really good at serving specific populations within the broader SNAP population, and bring to the program these specialized approaches and models. So I like to think of this, I like this word vocationalize, and I think a big part of this effort and a big thing that has made a difference with states is is with states that are able to kind of vocationalize their SNAP programs. And what I mean by that is they begin to sort of embed within their work this focus on employment, this focus on income. And that can start with an eligibility worker who's able to not just approve somebody for SNAP, but able to start a conversation with that participant about employment opportunities, to start a conversation to ask questions about, so now that we have you on SNAP, do you have a plan to increase your income? Would you like help returning to school, accessing an employment program, a training program, a job training program, or getting a better job? It's really about helping people not just survive, but really investing in people and investing in their future, and moving away from work and work activities as being a requirement and more of an opportunity and an investment. And then this concept, sort of this refocus on an expanded mission, leads to these new partnerships and connections within the workforce arena. And this is done on behalf of SNAP recipients. And again, it's about the third-party model, the 50-50 funding opportunity, and how that is a key element that SNAP agencies bring to the table when developing these partnerships. Next slide, Bree. So as I said, the lesson learned has really been about SNAP agencies developing this new type of relationship with the workforce providers. And so what a SNAP agency that's working at this actively experiences is they develop this new capacity to articulate the alignment and the opportunity offered by SNAP ENT to employment and training providers in the community. And understanding that this is a new and a kind of a different type of opportunity for community-based organizations and community colleges. And that this is really about, this is really core to creating their working relationship. So, what we've noticed and observed is the SNAP agency that is effective is really able to bring to the table, to this new partnership, this funding opportunity. And this is a funding opportunity, as we know, that really requires a level of collaboration and a different type of relationship than traditional funding relationships. Because the SNAP agency is asking a third-party partner to invest their eligible funds first to deliver their services to mutual participants, and then they're going to be reimbursed. And it's a different proposition. And it's important for the SNAP agency to thoroughly understand this and understand how this can work with third-party partners, and realize that as a SNAP agency and approaching this relationship, they're coming at it from a different perspective, meaning that they are not coming at this perspective with a pot of money that they're going to grant out or contract out and then have the traditional scope of work. They're asking the providers themselves to bring forward the money that they themselves have secured, this non-federal funding. And so that basic relationship, that basic sort of funding partnership changes the way a SNAP agency relates to a workforce partner. I think the other thing that states have been successful at developing their NT programs have been able to do is really understand and explain the flexibility behind the third-party model. Certainly there are complexities to the reimbursement model. There are parameters, there's policy things that have to be kept in mind and followed. But it's a model that's very, very flexible and is capable of supporting a broad range of programs and organizations and models that serve a really broad spectrum of the SNAP population and people who are looking for workforce services. So those are some true benefits. So as we said, the SNAP agency really experiences a shift in their mindset and how they work with providers. A couple, I would say, more concrete examples is once a SNAP agency is working with a group of providers, what we've seen states do effectively is have monthly or regular meetings with their provider community. And it's not just about the state telling the providers what to do, it's about sharing their practices, hearing what's working, hearing what's not working, and making adjustments. In a monitoring process where the state goes out and monitors their providers, they of course have to make sure that the policy guidelines are being followed. But at the same time, it's an opportunity to work in a more collaborative, sort of consultative type of fashion. It's not a, check the box, we got you type of relationship. It's how can we do this better? How can we mutually serve these clients with this sort of unique funding model more effectively? And then another way that this really can play out is how a SNAP agency goes about selecting and recruiting their providers. And that it's not a competitive process. It's more focused on engaging and recruiting providers in the community that can meet the needs of the SNAP population and that can manage and effectively utilize the funding model. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Bree, can you go to the next slide? Great. So one of the things that we've spent time working with states and counties on is this whole process of securing third-party partners and how essential that is. And once again, it's really sort of a new way of approaching this type of thing. It's a new way of doing business and working with community partners. So we talk about this process. And I think some of the first stages are really important. So first of all, the SNAP agency has to identify who in their community qualifies as a third-party partner. Who are the CBOs that are out there and available that might be serving a similar population? Who are the community colleges? How do we connect with the community and vocational technical colleges out there? And then from there, it's really educating this pool of potential providers about the model and about the SNAP agency's, what I would say, expanded mission and interest in building the skills of the SNAP population. And there's a real recruitment aspect to this, and helping the providers to understand the opportunity and the parameters around this. And then from there, once you've educated your providers, you move into this process of assessing and making sure that that these providers understand the model and they're in kind of alignment with the model. But as I noted before, recruiting third-party partners does not need to be, and in many cases, it should not be a competitive process. You're not trying to pick just the top two providers that have the most efficient budgets. You're looking for a range of providers that bring the right funding to the table and the right services, and that could potentially be a number of different providers. Potentially the only parameters around that would be how many providers the SNAP agency is ready to support and work with. And then moving through the contracting and onboarding process, onboarding in particular, it's really about laying out to the providers, what's expected, how this program is going to work, and really opening the door for feedback and for communication from them and hearing from them on how they think this program best works within their organization. Because that's one of the things that a third-party partner needs to do, is they need to understand this model and then really integrate it into what they do and make it fit within their own program and their own processes. And this whole way of working with people is not only new to the SNAP agency, but it's oftentimes new to workforce partners, and they need to sort of understand this is a different way of working. So next slide. So, as you're getting the point here, it's a new role, it's a new relationship, and it's a new area of expertise for the SNAP agency. And I think, again, in relationship with these providers, it's a shift in in the level of authority, where that sits. It's sort of a more balanced relationship. There's a balance of power and a balanced way of relating. SNAP agency, the SNAP agencies that have done well have really recognized and appreciated the knowledge base and the partnerships that are available with their workforce partners. And they've appreciated how much they need those partnerships and the capacity that they bring. And I think, kind of the last thing I want to just touch base on is this shift in mindset, this sort of expanded mission, this different way of relating has to be an organizational shift. It has to go from leadership down to the direct service level, and it has to be across all departments. Fiscal people, the contract people, procurement people, they need to understand how this is all different. Program people are probably the first to get on board. But data people, everybody needs to understand how this this program works and how it works a bit differently, and how some of the traditional approaches that they may be used to need to be sort of put aside. So it's clearly a conceptual change, and you know, it needs to take place at these different levels. But in practice, you know, I think it plays out in some very practical ways as well. And again, it's like the eligibility worker that can sort of change their messaging around SNAP and around SNAP ENT, and can engage participants in a different way, and in a way that really gets people to think about investing and building on these opportunities. It really has a lot to do with how the agency approaches these workforce providers, educates them, recruits them around this opportunity, and creates these contracts in full respect of the fact that the providers are bringing forth their funds and their services in advance. And it can impact how programs and services are designed and the opportunities that can be created, and how you support third-party partners to implement and grow a particular program. So that kind of sort of wraps up, you know, my piece on this need to really sort of assume a new way of doing business. And so at this point, I'm going to hand things over to Bree, who's going to talk more about project management and leadership and staffing. So Bree.
Great, thanks, Nick. So our second set of lessons learned, as Nick mentioned earlier, have to do with the people involved in SNAP ENT. And there are three factors, as we talked about earlier, that are really key for SNAP ENT programs to have in place in order to be able to advance effectively and efficiently. And these are leadership support, the right staffing, and a skilled project manager. And these factors are important to have in place not only at the state and county and district level, but also at the provider level. And we've learned that it's most effective if these elements are put into place as early as possible. And we've also learned that there's often a big difference between what these elements look like on paper and what they actually look like in action. And this applies to project management in particular, which I'll touch on. But first, I'd like to talk a bit about leadership support. And at the state, county level, I'm referring to agency leadership. And having the support of agency leadership is important for a couple of reasons. One is that SNAP ENT programs really depend on strong working relationships to function optimally. The strongest programs often display the greatest degree of collaboration, the greatest depth of collaboration with their partners and stakeholders. And at the same time, as Nick mentioned, SNAP ENT really represents oftentimes a new way of working. So if you're in the early stages of growing your program, you need to reach out to stakeholders and partners and forge these relationships and introduce this new and kind of potentially unfamiliar way of working to them. And now, if they have competing priorities, getting them on board and helping them with this learning curve, it could take some time. And you could also encounter some resistance. Like anytime you're getting something new off the ground, there are going to be speed bumps. And that's why having the support of agency leadership is so critical, because it opens doors. It lowers the resistance that you might encounter because it signals to staff and partners and stakeholders that SNAP ENT is an agency priority. And without this support, it's difficult to expand a program. And when a program does have the support, it usually grows more quickly because the support helps it garner more dedicated resources, helps it make steadier progress. It really does set the program up for success. Just like in this image here, providing a plant with the right soil and sunlight and nutrients allows it to establish strong roots and really thrive. So when a program has a champion in the agency leadership, that's even better, because that gives the program more vitality. It allows the program to better carry out its mission of providing quality employment and training services to its clients. So in contrast, when leadership support is lacking, program growth really is more limited. You see slower progress, and it's harder to get the resources that you need to grow the program. And all of this can make it difficult for a program to really realize its full potential. So just a few tips on how to cultivate this leadership support. Programs that are good at this, they involve leadership from the very start, and they invite leadership to key meetings with key stakeholders. And this is helpful because not only does it signal to stakeholders that there's leadership support, but it also keeps leadership informed and engaged. And that's a key recommendation that we would have, is that keeping leadership informed is critical. And it's especially important if there's going to be a transition in leadership as well. And this goes also for providers, because providers who are implementing SNAP ENT programming and starting to work with a state or county also need resources and support internally to build out this area of knowledge internally. So having the provider leadership on board is also very important. And so next I want to talk a bit about staffing. And as I mentioned earlier, a thriving SNAP ENT program, it really depends in large part on strong partnerships. And at the state or county level, and at the provider level, forging a strong team and having strong working relationships with partners from these different departments is really critical. Because the SNAP ENT program, it's not just the core team members who run the program. I think we tend to think of SNAP ENT as like the program manager, the project managers that are doing the daily operations and delivering the program. But it also depends on these other departments to carry out critical program functions like budgeting, invoicing, making payments. That's what the finance or the fiscal department would handle. It also involves contracting with providers, which Nick talked a lot about. And oftentimes the procurement department is, integral in putting those contracts together. But as we know, and as we've mentioned multiple times, SNAP ENT is a new way of doing business. It requires different practices. And the fiscal and procurement teams need to learn about ENT so that they can adjust their practices accordingly. And the core SNAP ENT team members, like the program manager, they need to determine how to work effectively with the fiscal and procurement teams so that they can put these good, solid practices in place. And this takes time. It takes coming together. It takes figuring out various SNAP ENT processes. It takes asking questions to figure out what processes and practices need to be modified. And so what tends to work best, we've learned and observed, is if the partner teams really do have a good, solid understanding of what SNAP ENT is and what it does, and if they have a dedicated SNAP ENT point of contact and like subject matter experts. So for example, the fiscal team member who's the subject matter expert in SNAP ENT, and the procurement team member who's the subject matter expert in SNAP ENT. It's really important to have somebody where that knowledge is housed. And so the education and partnership process between the core SNAP ENT program team and its partner departments, that should happen as early as possible. And if it doesn't, it can really impact the quality of the program and key program functions. And we've seen quite a few examples of this over the past 4 years where an ENT program started operating without first looping in fiscal and procurement from the very start. And they then had to backtrack because they ran into some challenges. So for example, sometimes states have procurement procedures that involve really considering value for cost. So there's a real focus on cost effectiveness, as Nick mentioned. And that makes sense when you're procuring goods and services from contractors. But we know ENT is different. And for ENT, you want to choose providers who have the ability to deliver high quality ENT services. And as Nick touched on, the way you assess them is to look at whether they have the right type of funding, whether they offer the right type of aligned services, whether they have enough administrative capacity to operate, ENT services and implement that programming, and whether they actually have the right participants who would be eligible for ENT. So the provider assessment process is different, and procurement needs to understand this, or else you run into these challenges or end up with these overly long and complex processes that don't help you find or bring on the high quality providers. And so the other thing we've observed is that there are a number of programs who have found that they don't actually have to go through their default, like they might have a default standard RFP process because ENT doesn't meet the conditions that require that process be used. But you don't find that out unless you ask these questions and have those conversations with procurement early on. And as for fiscal, again, working with providers is fundamentally different if fiscal tries to apply default practices to ENT without really fully understanding ENT. For example, provider reimbursements are a part of E&T, and like if fiscal doesn't understand what providers can be reimbursed for, they could end up either like limiting provider reimbursements, or there's some confusion about what's allowed and what's not. And even just budgeting and tracking processes could look different than the standard default way of doing things. So that's why, again, having that subject matter expertise is really important for fiscal. And just to touch on these other partners listed here, at the state or county level, having a strong relationship with SNAP eligibility staff is really critical, because staff members these staff members are a primary point of contact with potential participants. And if they aren't familiar with, or if they're a little unsure about the details of E&T, they can't speak effectively to potential participants about the opportunity. So putting in the time and effort to really work with eligibility staff can really pay dividends. I've also listed here data and IT, and that's really important as the program grows, because you'll need useful data and you'll need IT services. And so that's why these teams also need to understand E&T in order to help you obtain and use data and the IT services that you're going to need. The third area we wanted to talk about is project management. And we know that E&T involves working with a number of partners, and that there are a number of program components. And for the program to function optimally, something needs to connect all of these components and get them working together. And in E&T, that something is project management. So when a program has strong project management, it gets better results. And that's because there's communication, there's information sharing, there's these processes in place that allow program operations and delivery to be coordinated. It means that tasks and urgent issues aren't dropped, that questions are more quickly resolved, that stakeholders know what's going on and they have their needs met, and that leads to increased stakeholder satisfaction. So good project management, it just makes a program work well. And so when you see a program that functions smoothly, that's responsive, that has satisfied and invested stakeholders, that takes care of problems quickly and improves, you can be sure that under the surface, there's good project management that's holding everything together. And so good project management depends on having a strong project or sometimes program manager in place. And this is a hallmark of successful programs at the state and county level, but also at the provider level. They typically all have a strong project or program manager in place, or a team of project or program managers if they're a bit bigger. And the thing about project management is that if you were to describe it on paper, that description probably wouldn't capture what good project management actually looks like in practice, because it's a blend of art and science. It's a mix of technical skills and experience and people skills, which are pretty essential. So on paper, a project management's job duties probably correspond to what you see in the top middle box on this slide: planning, directing, and monitoring SNAP E&T work. And for SNAP E&T, what that looks like in action and practice is a project manager who's a doer, who quickly and also proactively solves problems, who can assemble a cross-departmental team and get everyone moving in the same direction. It involves communicating the right information to the right people in a way that would be effective. And it also typically involves having both the experience to do this plus good people skills. There's also a technical component to the work. The project manager develops tools, templates, materials tailored to their stakeholders and partners in a way that's useful for them. So it also involves them coordinating and communicating, getting feedback from partners to create something that works well. And the last category of work really involves learning and educating others about E&T. Learning and educating themselves and others about E&T. Because as we know, E&T can represent a learning curve, and it really helps if the project and program manager and the program itself has a strong working relationship with FNS. And here I'm referring to programs at the state or county level. FNS can really help the program and the program staff understand key SNAP E&T guidelines, information, understand what the priorities are and should be. So making sure that you're in alignment with FNS every step in the way is really critical. The most effective project managers that we've seen usually have the combination of skills and experience that you see in this bottom foundational block. They have program and project management experience. They know how to effectively build and lead a team. They have knowledge of the state government working environment, and they also engage effectively with stakeholders. And what really sets them apart is how they carry out these responsibilities. They inspire confidence in people by being effective at the day-to-day work, but also in how they communicate and collaborate. So if you're in a position to hire or appoint a project or program manager, keep this in mind because it will help inform what you need to look for. So, and with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Bob, to talk about the next set of lessons learned.
Thanks, Bree. So you're going to see a lot of overlap, I think, in the things we're talking about today. But I want to focus on kind of the angle of knowledge and expertise in building that kind of that organizational understanding and knowledge of SNAP E&T. As Marcy mentioned before, that early on in the SNAP to Skills project, we had some policy papers that were written and published. One of the ones that really sticks out in my mind is, in one of the first ones that was published, was why now is a time for states to build their SNAP E&T programs. Well, now we have about 4.5 years of knowledge and experience that's been added, to this program and the project. So, and that knowledge is a lot more accessible to folks. So really, I think now more than ever is the time for building effective SNAP E&T third-party model programs. And as Marcy mentioned before, a really kind of a stopping point for some states is really how do they get started? How do they get going in doing this? And I think it starts really with people willing to learn and willing to start building that organizational understanding of the program. This is some of the basic things that need to be learned in this process. I think it goes without saying that E&T components need to know what those are about and how they look in practice. What a third-party model is and how that can work well, and then provider budgets and how those fit into the state plan and getting in a really good provider budget package together so you have an executable state plan. And really, it's important for states to learn how they can help their providers build good budgets and make that process as easy as possible, as simple as possible, to kind of reduce that administrative workload. And then there's learning how to do referrals and eligibility verification and involving the third-party provider in that process so you're kind of all on the same page and that process can work smoothly. And then building those assessments and employment plans, those are very important. And then really understanding how to use the 100% funds and the 50/50 funds strategically to help build your program and make it more effective. I think one of the things that really goes kind of misunderstood is that the person running the program doesn't have to have that strong workforce knowledge at first. But really they can learn about the program and then communicate that to other agencies that are in the workforce development system, like the community-based organizations and community colleges that you're going to be working with. And then they can draw on their experience and learn from that. Next slide. Learning about SNAP E&T and third-party partnerships really goes beyond just looking at kind of the toolkits and guides. And like Marcy mentioned, there's a lot more information out there now on the SNAP to Skills website especially that really tells you kind of how to do things. The guides and toolkits, kind of tell you what to do and what not to do, but not necessarily telling you how to do it. So successful states have, utilized things like their state exchange initiatives, and this is really a good way for them to learn from other states. And these can be organized and planned through the FNS regional offices. There's also webinars that Snap to Skills has developed, and as well as FNS regional offices have developed to help folks learn, how things really work in practice. And they can learn from other states and agencies that have done this and done it well. And I think in order to really build this organizational knowledge, you have to have a plan. States that have done this successfully has built a plan for sharing this knowledge among their, not only within their agency, but with other stakeholders that are going to be part of the program and really can help spread the word to potential consumers of the program. Some states, for example, have run really successful road shows where they actually go out across the state and share that information with their staff and also with potential providers. They have created user-friendly websites that and targeted marketing materials. So really to have a successful Snap ENT 50/50 program, it really helps to establish that strong organizational understanding and working knowledge of Snap ENT policy and programming. Remember, it's been tested. There's several years of knowledge behind us and expertise, and there's experience out there to draw from. So now I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit and Bree, if you go to the next slide, and talk a little bit about expanded use of technology. I think that's one of the most important things that we've learned through the Snap to Skills project is really the need for automation for a successful Snap ENT program operations and expansion, and also for kind of effective program project management. States that have been successful in growing their programs, at the same time minimizing the administrative workload that comes from scaling a program, have made significant investments in technology and systems enhancements. Now there's different levels of automation enhancements that states can make. I think one of the easiest and simple things that a state can do, and that we've seen this very successful, is to really allow that look-in capability for their third-party providers, so that at the least they can look to see if somebody is receiving SNAP, and then determine that SNAP ENT eligibility, so they can start working with the individual rather quickly. I think the ultimate thing we want to see is kind of a shared case management system. We've seen states that have upgraded their systems, and then sometimes they upgrade them or they kind of build new systems from scratch. Either way, it's a way for getting third-party partners involved, getting them able to manage their own caseloads, and really helps build efficiency and effectiveness of the program. It also helps both the state and the third-party providers share information and gather better data, more useful data that they can use to meet the programming requirements of the program, and also to help measure impact and program success. Complete system upgrades, the participants, they receive greater access to the program, better targeted services, and the program has a capability to expand to a greater capacity. We know that the system technology upgrades can take time and money, and it's not cheap. Some states are able to gather their resources within the state and complete those upgrades using internal talent and again those internal resources. But others have to hire outside contractors because they don't have that talent available within their state. Both options, they really have advantages, and some have disadvantages. Because of some competing priorities within the state, and using internal expertise and resources could take more time, but it usually costs less. Hiring an outside contractor could get the work done faster, but that's usually more expensive. However, technology upgrades and expanding the system capacity are great ways to use your SNAP ENT 100% funds and 50/50 funds. We've seen states do this rather effectively. We've talked to SNAP ENT analysts across the country that are working with their states to get them to utilize their 100% funds effectively. And really those technology upgrades are a good way to do that. if the 100% fund allocation that you get is not enough, we've seen states kind of leverage their 50-50 funds if they can get some funding within the state to do that. If they don't have that, then they can also get funds, additional 100% funds, either through requesting carryover funds from FNS, or they can get some special request some special technology upgrade grants that are available from time to time. You know, throughout the process, improving the system capacity enhancements, you know, we know that you can achieve better results and establish good communication with the department IT contacts, and that really helps you get those improvements done quickly. Again, successful SNAP E&T 50-50 programs do require expanded systems infrastructure, and we've learned that an investment in automation and technology upgrades to support program expansion, increase operations, makes expanding a lot more doable, and results are more successful for your SNAP E&T program. Okay, we go on to the next slide. So that's the end of our presentation, and there's a few things we want to do before we get to the Q&A portion of this session. I want to ask you that, you know, sometime soon when you get back, you know, get with your state or county teams and assess your SNAP E&T program status. Then hopefully you can pick two or three key takeaway things from the session today and apply them locally to your program. Go to the last slide. And we want to wish you all success, and thank you for listening today. The end.
Thanks, Bob, Nick, and Bree. It's a wealth of information, you know, collected across 4 or 5 years and 28 states. There's a lot more where that came from, too. So before we begin our Q&A, I want to thank you all for addressing this really interesting and sometimes dry, but really, really, really important topic. And at this time, we will pose questions from attendees that we've been collecting through the presentation. As for answering them, you can any attendee can still submit questions using that Q&A feature. Thank you.